Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about Matteo Esposito's new play, The Value of Many. So those of you who have seen my previous videos on Esposito's plays, Moonchild and Sorting It Out, will know that Esposito is a playwright with autism, and he writes a lot about the experience of autistic people, discrimination against people, actually with disabilities more broadly, but autism is his specific focus because that's his most immediate experience. But discrimination against people with disabilities, and sort of problems of social acceptance for people with disabilities. Sorry. And so The Value of Many is in this trajectory. Actually, in terms of the broad plot outlines, it's somewhat similar to Sorting It Out, because we have a character, in this case Dexter, a businessman, who is just a total dick to a random person with autism that he doesn't know, Josh, who works as a busboy in a local cafe. Dexter's just a total dick to him, even though Dexter's friend Larson is like, dude, stop being a dick, because, you know, you're a dick. Dexter does not take this advice to heart until Dexter and Larson are in a car crash. Larson dies and Dexter is paralyzed. And so because he now has that experience of being disabled, Dexter is able to look at the world from a different perspective. And so he realizes that the way that he treated Josh was wrong. There's a fairly lengthy and developed reconciliation portion. Josh and his boss, Shirley, read about the accident in the paper. Josh, they decide to bring Dexter a card, basically, so that Josh can say, I forgive you for being a dick to me. And then Dexter is sort of reformed. He starts treating his associate Bill much better. He gets Josh a better job working at the company that Dexter is now retiring from. And so basically you have this again, extended reconciliation scene in which people come together around empathy. They come together around the power of shared experience, of building community, etc., etc. And I think that's one of the great things that you see sort of across Esposito's plays, at least the ones that I'm familiar with, is this focus on building community and accepting others, regardless of things like disability, but also regardless of things like them being an asshole. Like this idea that you can overcome people's terrible character elements in terms of the people who are discriminatory against people with disabilities, but also that the people that you can forgive, because that's one of the defining characteristics of the people with disabilities in Esposito's plays, is this boundless ability to forgive people who are dicks to them. And I imagine that that is probably rooted in genuine experience as people with disabilities encounter discrimination continually. And so I imagine that for many people with disabilities, that's almost a survival necessity, the need to sort of forgive people and come to terms with that experience, which is shitty, but we live in a shitty world in many ways. But the other thing that I think is really, really interesting about The Value of Many that we don't have in Sorting It Out or Moonchild is the element of work discrimination, labor discrimination, because before the car crash, Dexter says several times to Larson, I wouldn't hire people with disabilities. He's just direct about that. Like, it is a And Dexter even acknowledges that this is a discriminatory position. He does not feel bad about holding that discriminatory position or about the fact that it is a discriminatory position. He simply accepts that as, I, a successful entrepreneur, would not do this, and therefore it's okay. What's interesting to me about the inclusion of this element within the play is that, at least in the US, I think it's the Americans with Disabilities Act prohibits employment discrimination on the basis of disability, provided the person is capable of actually doing the job. And since Canada, where Esposito is from and lives, tends to be a more humane society than the United States, I imagine that there are in Canada, I don't know this for sure, and I didn't look this up, but I imagine in Canada there are laws preventing discrimination based on disability. The problem, of course, is that it still happens, in the same way that discrimination on the basis of race, of gender, of sexual identity, of religion, of national origin, etc., whatever it is, continues to happen, even though these are protected identity categories against which it is illegal to discriminate in hiring. Part of the problem is that if you're an employer and you don't want to hire someone in a protected identity category, you can always fall back on, well, I didn't think they would be able to do the job, or I didn't think that they were qualified, or something like this. And so it becomes, and actually that's the thing. Dexter claims that the reason he would not hire someone like Josh is because Josh is not qualified. Dexter has not seen Josh's resume, knows nothing about his background or experience. As Larson points out, Josh was doing a good job as a busboy in this cafe. Like, he was clearly a hard worker, he was clearly dedicated, he was clearly doing the job well, doing what the job requires with no problems, except for the fact that Dexter was being a dick to him. So Dexter's assertion that people with disabilities obviously don't have qualifications for jobs is completely unfounded, but this is the kind of logic that employers can use in discriminating against people with disabilities, or people of ethnic minorities, or women, or people of different religions, or whatever it is, whatever protected identity category it is. This is one way that employers, as well as like landlords and things like this, can get around legal protections for people with disabilities, or whatever protected identity category it is. So that's a really interesting component of the play, because it is a real world problem where employers are able, or landlords, or whatever it is, are able to do something that is illegal, provided they can make some kind of justification that they are doing it for a reason that's not illegal. So that's a big, big problem. And Esposito deals with it, I think, pretty well here, because, again, initially Dexter is like, just blanket, I refuse to hire people with disabilities. But we have Josh, who, in the first portion of the play, is working, so clearly is capable of doing jobs. And then in the latter portion of the play, Dexter and Bill, his associate, offer Josh a job working in their firm. So clearly something has changed here in Dexter's mind. And it is this realization that, in fact, people with disabilities are capable of working, that having a disability is not in itself something that disqualifies you from being capable of holding productive employment. And so again, that's part of this sort of this focus on reconciliation and this focus on coming to accept people with disabilities as full members of the community that's so characteristic of Esposito's work.